It's 2017 and Old Time Radio DVD is still here. Check out our new customer ownership program and the lowest prices ever. Just go to oldtimeradiodvd.com for full information about this wonderful program. Don't forget our new program, 123 Ready TV. Folks, this is really a great app for Android and Windows phones, computers, and tablets. And it's only $19.99. In the near future, we will be adding a new component to it, Old Time Radio. It's a great product for 2017. Visit oldtimeradiodvd.com today. Place your order. You'll be glad you did.
Going to another planet, and about his chances of returning from it. What he had not thought about was being on it. It was with a kind of stupefaction each morning that he found himself neither arriving in nor escaping from, but simply living on Malacandra. Waking, sleeping, eating, swimming, and even, as the days passed, talking. A man from the planet Earth, he was now a member of this community of tall, thin, black-furred creatures, something like penguins, something like seals or otters, who were called Harassa. The wonder of it smote him most strongly when he found himself, about 3 weeks after his arrival, actually going for a walk. A few weeks later, he had his favorite walks and his favorite foods. He was beginning to develop habits. He knew a male from a female Harass at sight, and even individual differences were becoming plain. Hayoi, who had first found him, miles away to the north, was a very different person from the grey-muzzled, venerable Honora, who was daily teaching him the Harass language. And the young of the species were different again. They were delightful. Of the community in general, his earlier impressions were all gradually being corrected. His first diagnosis of their culture was what he called Old Stone Age. The few cutting instruments they possessed were made of stone. They seemed to have no pottery, but a few clumsy vessels used for boiling, and boiling was the only cookery they attempted. Their common drinking vessel, dish and ladle all in one, was the oyster-like shell in which he had first tasted Harass hospitality. The fish which it contained was their only animal food. Vegetable fare they had in great plenty and variety, some of it delicious. Even the pinkish-white weed which covered the whole Handramit, the valley, was edible at a pinch, so that if he had starved before Hayoi found him, he would have starved amidst abundance. Their dwellings were beehive-shaped huts of stiff leaf, and the villages, there were several in the neighborhood, were always built beside rivers for warmth and well upstream towards the walls of the Handramit, where the water was hottest. They slept on the ground. They seemed to have no arts except a kind of poetry and music, which was practiced almost every evening by a team or troop of 4 Harassa. Ransom could make nothing of the music. The voices were not disagreeable, and the scale seemed adapted to human ears, but the time pattern was meaningless to his sense of rhythm. But the real revolution in his understanding of the Harassa began when he had learned enough of their language to attempt some satisfaction of their curiosity about himself. In answer to their questions, he began by saying that he had come out of the sky. Honora immediately asked from which Handra, planet. Ransom was quite unable to point Earth out to them in the night sky. They seemed surprised at his inability, and repeatedly pointed out to him a bright planet low on the western horizon, a little south of where the sun had gone down. Ransom was surprised that they selected a planet instead of a mere star, and stuck to their choice. Could it be possible that they understood astronomy? Unfortunately, he still knew too little of the language to explore their knowledge. He turned the conversation by asking them the name of the bright southern planet, and was told that it was Thulkandra, the silent world or planet. "Why do you call it Thulk?" he asked. "Why silent?" No one knew. "The Sarane know," said Honora. "That is the sort of thing they know." Then Ransom was asked how he had come, and made a very poor attempt at describing the spaceship, but again, the Sarane would know. Had he come alone? No, he had come with 2 others of his kind, bad men. Bent men was the nearest Harassian equivalent, who tried to kill him, but he had run away from them. The Harassa found this very difficult, but all finally agreed that he ought to go to Oyasa. Oyasa would protect him. Ransom asked who Oyasa was. Slowly, and with many misunderstandings, he hammered out the information that Oyasa, 1, lived at Meldalorn, 2, knew everything and ruled everyone, 3, had always been there, and 4, was not a Haros, nor one of the Sereni. Then Ransom, following his own idea, asked if Oyasa had made the world. The Harossa almost barked in the fervour of their denial. Did people in Thalcandra not know that Malildil the Young had made and still ruled the world? Even a child knew that. Where did Malildil live? Ransom asked. With the Old One. And who was the Old One? Ransom did not understand the answer. He tried again. Where was the Old One? He is not that sort, said Honora, that he has to live anywhere. It became plain that Malildil was a spirit without body, parts, or passions. He is not a Hanau, said the Harossa. What is Hanau? Asked Ransom. You are Hanau, I am Hanau, the Seroni are Hanau, the Pethifiltrigi are Hanau. Pethifiltrigi, said Ransom. More than 10 days' journey to the west, said Honora. The forests are of other colours than here. They are blue and green. It is very deep there. It goes to the roots of the world. The best things that can be dug out of the earth are there. The Pethifiltrigi live there. They delight in digging. What they dig, they soften with fire and make things of. They are little people, smaller than you, long in the snout, pale, busy. They have long limbs in front. No Hanau can match them in making and shaping things as none can match us in singing. But let Haman see. He turned and spoke to one of the younger Harossa, and presently, passed from hand to hand, there came to Ransom a little bowl. He held it close to the firelight and examined it. It was certainly of gold, and Ransom realized the meaning of Devine's interest in Malacandra. Is there much of this thing? He asked. Yes, he was told. It was washed down in most of the rivers, but the best and most was among the Pethifiltrigi, and it was they who were skilled in it. Arbor Ha, they called it. Sun's blood. He looked at the bowl again. It was covered with fine etching. He saw pictures of Harossa and of smaller, almost frog-like animals, and then of Thorns. He pointed to the latter inquiringly. Serene, said the Harossa, confirming his suspicions. They live up almost on the Harandra, in the big caves. The frog-like animals, or tapir-headed, frog-bodied animals, were Pethifiltrigi. Ransom turned it over in his mind. On Malacandra, apparently, 3 distinct species had reached rationality, and none of them had yet exterminated the other 2. It concerned him intensely to find out which was the real master. These Serene know more than the Harossa? Asked Ransom. This produced more a debate than an answer. What emerged finally was the Serene or Thorns were perfectly helpless in a boat and could not fish to save their lives, could hardly swim, could make no poetry, and even when Harossa had made it for them, could understand only the inferior sorts. But they were admittedly good at finding out things about the stars and understanding the darker utterances of Oyasa and telling what happened in Malacandra long ago, longer ago than anyone could remember. Ah, the intelligentsia, thought Ransom. They must be the real rulers, however it is disguised. Naturally, Ransom's conversations with Harossa did not all turn on Malacandra. He had to repay them with information about Earth. They were even more interested in what he had to tell them of the aquatic animal with snapping jaws which he had fled from in their own world and even in their own Handramit. It was a Hanakra, they all agreed. They were intensely excited. There had not been a Hanakra in the valley for many years. The youth of the Harossa got out their weapons, primitive harpoons with points of bone, and the very cubs began playing at Hanakra hunting in the shallows. Hoyoy set off at once to do something to his boat, and Ransom accompanied him. They walked together to Hoyoy's Creek, a stone's throw through the forest. The warlike nature of their preparations suggested many questions to Ransom. He knew no word for war, but he managed to make Hoyoy understand what he wanted to know. Did Serene and Harossa and Pithtrigi ever go out like this, with weapons, against each other? What for? Asked Hoyoy. It was difficult to explain. If both wanted one thing and neither would give it, said Ransom, Would the other at last come with force? Would they say, give it, or we kill you? What sort of thing? Well, food, perhaps. If the other Hanar wanted food, why should we not give it to them? We often do. But how if we had not enough for ourselves? But Malaldil will not stop the plants growing. Hoyoi, if you had more and more young, would Malaldil broaden the hand remit and make enough plants for them all? The Serane know that sort of thing. But why should we have more young? Ransom found this difficult. At last he said, is the begetting of young not a pleasure among the Harassa? A very great one, Haman. This is what we call love. If a thing is a pleasure, Haman wants it again. He might want the pleasure more often than the number of young that could be fed. It took Hoyoi a long time to get the point. You mean, he said slowly, that he might do it not only in 1 or 2 years of his life, but again? Yes. But why? Would he want his dinner all day or want to sleep after he has slept? I do not understand. But a dinner comes every day. This love, you say, comes only once while the Haros lives. But it takes his whole life. When he is young, he has to look for his mate. And then he has to court her. Then he begets young. Then he rears them. And then he remembers all this and boils it inside him and makes it into poems and wisdom. But the pleasure he must be content only to remember. That is like saying, my food I must be content only to eat. I don't understand. Ransom pondered. Here, unless Hoyoi was deceiving him, was a species naturally continent, naturally monogamous. And yet, was it so strange? That the Harassa should have such instincts was mildly surprising. But how came it that the instincts of the Harassa so closely resembled the unattained ideals of that far-divided species, man, whose instincts were so deplorably different? What was the history of man? But Hoyoi was speaking again. Undoubtedly, he said, Malaldil made us so. How could there ever be enough to eat if everyone had 20 young? And how could we endure to live and let time pass if we were always crying for 1 day or 1 year to come back? If we did not know that every day in a life fills the whole life with expectation and memory, and that these are that day? All the same, said Ransom, unconsciously nettled on behalf of his own world, Malaldil has let in the Hanakra. Oh, but that is so different. I long to kill the Hanakra, as he also longs to kill me. I hope that my ship will be the first, and I first in my ship with my straight spear when the black jaws snap. And if he kills me, my people will mourn, and my brothers will desire still more to kill him. But they will not wish that there were no Hanakra. Nor do I. How can I make you understand when you do not understand the poets? The Hanakra is our enemy, but he is also our beloved. We hang images of him in our houses, and the sign of all the Haros is a Hanakra. In him the spirit of the valley lives, and our young play at being Hanaraki as soon as they can splash in the shallows. And then he kills them. Not often, then. The Harassa would be bent Harassa if they let him get so near. Long before he had come down so far, we should have sought him out. No, Haman, it is not a few deaths roving the world around him that makes Hanau miserable. It is a bent Hanau that would blacken the world. Hoyoi, said Ransom, it comes into my head that when I first saw you, and before you saw me, you were already speaking. That was how I knew that you were Hanau, for otherwise I should have thought you a beast and run away. But who were you speaking to? To an Eldil. What is that? I saw no one. Are there no Eldila in your world, Haman? That must be strange. But what are they? They come from Oyasa. They are, I suppose, a kind of Hanau. As we came out today, I passed a child who said she was talking to an Eldil, but I could see nothing. One can see by looking at your eyes, Haman, that they are different from ours. But Eldila are hard to see. They are not like us. Light goes through them. You must be looking in the right place and the right time, and that is not likely to come about unless the Eldil wishes to be seen. Sometimes you can mistake them for a sunbeam or even a moving of the leaves. But when you look again, you see that it was an Eldil and that it is gone. But whether your eyes can ever see them, I do not know. The Serene would know that. The whole village was astir next morning before the sunlight had penetrated the forest. Ransom found that his own share in the hunt had been taken for granted. He was to be in Hoyoi's boat with Hoyoi and Huin. The two Harossa would take it in turns to paddle, while Ransom and the disengaged Haross would be in the bows. He understood the Harossa well enough now to know that they were making him the noblest offer in their power. A short time ago, in England, nothing would have seemed more impossible to Ransom than to accept the post of honor and danger in an attack upon an unknown but certainly deadly aquatic monster. His intention was clear. Whatever happened, he must show that the human species also were Hanau. And he felt an unwonted assurance that somehow or other he would be able to go through with it. The lake was just giving back the first rays of the sun when he found himself kneeling side by side with Huin, as he had been told to, in the bows of Hoyoi's ship, with a little pile of throwing spears between his knees and one in his right hand, stiffening his body against the motion as Hoyoi paddled them out into their place. At least 100 boats were taking part in the hunt. While the central party slowly beat up the current, the light ships, paddling far faster, would cruise at will up and down either side of it to receive the quarry as soon as he broke what might be called his cover. In this game, numbers and intelligence were on the side of the Harossa. The Hanakra had speed on his side, and also invisibility, for he could swim underwater. He was nearly invulnerable except through his open mouth. If the two hunters in the bows of the boat he made for muffed their shots, this was usually the last of them and of their boat. Ransom found his own ship speeding northward as fast as Hoyoi could drive her, already passing boat after boat and making for the freest water. The speed was exhilarating. Behind them arose, re-echoed from the remote rock pinnacles on either side of the valley, the bell-like, deep-mouthed voices of more than 200 Harossa, more musical than a cry of hounds, but closely akin to it in quality as in purport. Something long sleeping in the blood awoke in Ransom. It did not seem impossible at this moment that even he might be the Hanakra slayer, that the fame of Haman Hanakra Punt might be handed down to posterity in this world that knew no other man. For a long time, nothing happened. He became conscious of the stiffness of his attitude and deliberately relaxed his muscles. Presently, Wynne reluctantly went aft to paddle, and Hoyoi came forward to take his place. Almost as soon as the change had been effected, Hoyoi spoke softly to Ransom and said, without taking his eyes off the current, "There is an Eldil coming to us over the water." Ransom could see nothing, or nothing that he could distinguish from imagination and the dance of sunlight on the lake. A moment later, Hoyoi spoke again, but not to him. "What is it, Skyborn?" What happened next was the most uncanny experience Ransom had yet felt on Malacandra. Ransom heard the voice. It seemed to come out of the air about a yard above his head, and it was almost an octave higher than that of a Haross. He realized that a very little difference in his ear would have made the Eldil as inaudible to him as it was invisible. "It is the man with you, Hoyoi," said the voice. "He ought not to be there. He ought to be going to Oyasa. Bent Hanau of his own kind from Falkandra are following him. He should go to Oyasa. If they find him anywhere else, there will be evil." "He hears you, Skyborn," said Hoyoi. "And have you no message for Helera, my wife? You know what she wishes to be told." "I have a message for Helera," said the Eldil. "But you will not be able to take it. I go to her now myself. All that is well. Only let the man go to Oyasa. There was a moment's silence. He is gone, said Wynne, and we have lost our share in the hunt. Yes, said Hayoi with a sigh. We must put Haman ashore and teach him the way to Merlalorn. Ransom was not so sure of his courage, but that one part of him felt an instant relief at the idea of any diversion from their present business. But the other part of him urged him to hold on to his newfound manhood. No. There is time for that after the hunt. We must kill the Hanakra first. Once an Eldil has spoken, began Hayoi, when suddenly Wynne gave a great cry. A bark, Ransom would have called it 3 weeks ago, and pointed. There, not a furlong away, was a torpedo-like track of foam, and now, visible through a wall of foam, they caught the metallic glint of the monster's sides. Wynne was paddling furiously. Hayoi threw and missed. As his first spear smote the water, his second was already in the air. This time it must have touched the Hanakra. He wheeled right out of the current. Ransom saw the great black pit of his mouth, twice open and twice shut with its snap of shark-like teeth. He himself had thrown now, hurriedly, excitedly, with unpracticed hand. Buck! Shouted Hayoi to Wynne, who was already backing water with every pound of his vast strength. Then all became confused. Ransom heard Wynne shout, "Shaw!" There came a shock that flung him forward, almost into the Hanakra's jaws, and he found himself at the same moment up to his waist in water. It was at him. The teeth were snapping. Then, as he flung shaft after shaft into the great mouth of the gaping brute, he saw Hayoi perched incredibly on its back, on its nose, bending forward and hurling from there. Almost at once, the Haros was dislodged and fell with a wide splash nearly 10 yards away. But the Hanakra was killed. Ransom and the two Harosa, Hayoi and Wynne, had killed the monster Hanakra after a desperate struggle in the water. When Ransom recollected himself, they were all on shore, wet, steaming, trembling with exertion, and embracing one another. They were on a little promontory, free of forest, on which they had run aground in the confusion of the fight. The wreckage of the boat and the corpse of the monster lay confused together in the water beside them. No sound from the rest of the hunting party was audible. They had been almost a mile ahead when they had met the Hanakra. All three sat down to recover their breath. At that moment, Ransom was deafened by a loud sound. A perfectly familiar sound, which was the last thing he expected to hear. It was a terrestrial, human, and civilized sound. It was the crack of an English rifle, and Hayoi, at his feet, was struggling to rise and gasping. There was blood on the white weed where he struggled. Ransom dropped on his knees beside him. "Hayoi, can you hear me?" said Ransom with his face close to the round seal-like head. "Hayoi, it is through me that this has happened. It is the other Hamana who have hit you, the two that brought me to Malacandra. They can throw death at a distance with the thing they have made. I should have told you. We are all a bent race. We have come here to bring evil on Malacandra. His speech died away into the inarticulate. He did not know the words for forgive or shame or fault, hardly the word for sorry. He could only stare into Hayoi's distorted face in speechless guilt. But the Haros seemed to understand. It was saying something, and Ransom laid his ear close to the working mouth. Hayoi's dulling eyes were fixed on his own. It muttered, and then, at last, Haman, Hanakrapan. Man, Hanakra slayer. Then there came a contortion of the whole body, a gush of blood and saliva from the mouth. The glazed eyes and the slowly stiffening, bedraggled fur were like those of any dead beast found in an earthly wood. Ransom resisted an infantile impulse to break out into imprecations on Weston and Levine. Instead, he raised his eyes to meet those of Wynne, who was crouching, Harosa do not kneel, on the other side of the corpse. "I'm in the hands of your people, Wynne," he said. "They must do as they will. But if they are wise, they will kill me, and certainly they will kill the other two." "One does not kill Hanau," said Wynne. "Only Oyasa does that. But these other, where are they?" Ransom glanced round. It was open on the promontory, but thick wood came down to where it joined the mainland, perhaps 200 yards away. "Somewhere in the wood," he said. "Lie down." He had some difficulty in making Wynne do as he suggested. When both were lying in dead ground, their feet almost in the water, the Haros spoke again. "Why did they kill him?" he asked. They would not know he was Hanau, said Ransom. I have told you that there is only one kind of Hanau in our world. They would think he was a beast. If they thought that, they would kill him for pleasure, or in fear, or because they were hungry. There was a short silence. I am wondering, said Ransom, if they saw me. It is for me they are looking. Perhaps if I went to them, they would be content and come no farther into your land. But why do they not come out of the wood to see what they have killed? Our people are coming, said Wynne, turning his head. Ransom looked back and saw the lake black with boats. The main body of the hunt would be with them in a few minutes. They are afraid of the harass, said Ransom. That is why they do not come out of the wood. I will go to them, Wynne. No, said Wynne. I have been thinking. All this has come from not obeying the Eldil. He said you were to go to Oyasa. You ought to have been already on the road. You must go now. But that will leave the bent Hamana here. They may do more harm. They will not set on the Harassa. You have said they are afraid. It is more likely that we will come upon them. Never fear, they will not see us or hear us. We will take them to Oyasa. But you must go now, as the Eldil said. Now listen, and I will teach you the way. The Harass explained to Ransom that there was a short way, a mountain road across the corner of the high country, the Harandra, between two canyons, which would bring him down to Meldalorn on the second day. He must go into the wood before them and through it until he came to the mountain wall of the Handrabit, and he must work south along the roots of the mountains till he came to a road cut up between them. Up this he must go, and somewhere beyond the tops of the mountains he would come to the tower of Orgray. Orgray would help him. Gwyn realized that Ransom might meet the other two Hamana as soon as he entered the wood. If they catch you, he said, then it will be as you say. They will come no farther into our land. But it is better to be taken on your way to Oyasa than to stay here. And once you are on the way to him, I do not think he will let the Bent One stop you. Until he reached the wood, Ransom found it difficult to think of anything except the possibility of another rifle bullet from Weston or Devine. He thought that they probably still wanted him alive rather than dead, and this, combined with the knowledge that her Haross was watching him, enabled him to proceed with at least external composure. He made a strong resolution, defying in advance all changes of mood, that he would faithfully carry out the journey to Meldalorn if it could be done. It was not possible, he told himself, that the Harassa should obey any evil or monstrous creature, and they had told him, or had they, he was not quite sure, that Oyasa was not a Sorn. About an hour later, he suddenly came out of the wood into bright sunshine. He was only 20 yards from the almost perpendicular bases of the mountain spires, too close to them to see their tops. Ransom began to work his way southward along the narrow, broken ground between wood and mountain. Great spurs of the mountains had to be crossed every few moments, and even in that lightweight world it was intensely tiring. An open way through the wood appeared on the left, and on the right he saw the road, a single ledge, or in places a trench, cut sideways and upwards across the sweep of such a valley as he had not seen before. It took his breath away. The insanely steep, hideously narrow staircase without steps, leading up and up from where he stood to where it was an almost invisible thread on the pale green surface of the rock. Instantly, he began the ascent. Such a journey would have been impossible on Earth. The first quarter of an hour would have reduced a man of Ransom's build and age to exhaustion. Here, he was at first delighted with the ease of his movement, and then staggered by the gradient and length of the climb, which, even under Maracandrian conditions, soon bowed his back and gave him an aching chest and trembling knees. The world grew stranger. Among the Harassa, Ransom had almost lost the feeling of being on a strange planet. Here it returned upon him with desolating force. It was no longer the world, scarcely even a world. It was a planet, a star, a waste place in the universe, millions of miles from the world of men. It was impossible to recall what he had felt about Hoyoi or Hwin or the Eldilla or Oyasa. It seemed fantastic to have thought he had duties to such hobgoblins, if they were not hallucinations, met in the wilds of space. He had nothing to do with them. He was a man. Why had Weston and Devine left him alone like this? But all the time the old resolution, taken when he could still think, was driving him up the road. Often he forgot where he was going and why. The movement became a mechanical rhythm, from weariness to stillness, from stillness to unbearable cold, from cold to motion again. Ransom noticed that the Hadramit, now an insignificant part of the landscape, was full of a sort of haze. He had never seen a fog while he was living there. Perhaps that was what the air of the Hadramit looked like from above. Certainly it was different air from this. There was something more wrong with his lungs and heart than even the cold and the exertion accounted for. And though there was no snow, there was an extraordinary brightness. The light was increasing, sharpening, and growing whiter, and the sky was a much darker blue than he had ever seen on Malacandra. Indeed, it was darker than blue. It was almost black, and the jagged spires of rock standing against it were like his mental picture of a lunar landscape. Some stars were visible.